What happens when you press a single penny into a tree stump and every buck on the property starts showing up on camera within a week? That is not a hypothetical. That is not clickbait. That is what happened on a piece of eastern Kentucky hardwood ridge I hunt, when a buddy who grew up on a cattle farm told me something I had never heard in 27 years of chasing whitetails. He said his grandfather used to nail two different metals to a fence post, and the cows would lick the post until the wood was polished smooth. He said his grandfather called it a battery lick. I had never heard that term in my life, and I thought he was making it up. I had no idea what he was talking about. He explained that when two different metals touch each other in the presence of moisture, whether that is rain or saliva or morning dew, a small electrical current forms between them and releases tiny amounts of metal ions into the moisture. Those ions taste like minerals, and deer, just like cattle, cannot resist licking them. I went home and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and looked it up, thinking there was no way this was real. The science is called galvanic reaction, and it is the same basic chemistry that makes a car battery work, just on a much smaller scale. Two dissimilar metals plus moisture equals a tiny electrical charge that corrodes the more reactive metal and releases its ions into whatever liquid is present. In the case of a penny made after 1982, you already have two metals built into one coin. The United States Mint switched the composition in 1982 from solid copper to a zinc core with copper plating, which means every penny in your pocket from the last 40 years is a ready-made galvanic cell. The core is zinc. The outer shell is copper, 1 cent, 2 metals. A mineral lick that costs less than a dime if you use 10 of them. And the deer response is documented across decades of old-timer knowledge that somehow never made it onto YouTube. I ran this on my eastern Kentucky property and on a buddy's lease in SE, Minnesota, and the results were consistent enough that I stopped using commercial mineral blocks on both properties. Stay until the end because there is a specific placement method that triples the response rate compared to just tossing pennies on a stump. And it involves a drill bit, a dead tree, and about 90 seconds of prep that changes how the galvanic reaction delivers ions to the surface. Before we go any further, a few things you need to know about legality and limitations. Mineral licks, salt licks, and anything a deer puts in its mouth can be classified as bait under your state regulations. Some states ban mineral licks entirely during hunting season. Others allow them year-round on private land, but ban them on public. The rules vary by state and sometimes by county within a state. Spend 5 minutes on your state wildlife agency website before you try this. It is the cheapest insurance policy in hunting, and ignorance is not a defense if a game warden is standing behind your truck. The science behind why this works is not complicated, but it is specific. A post-1982 American penny is roughly 97.5% zinc by weight, with a thin copper plating on the outside, about 2.5% of the total mass. Zinc is the more reactive of the two metals on the galvanic scale, which means when moisture touches the boundary where zinc meets copper, the zinc corrodes first and releases zinc ions into the moisture. Zinc is one of the most important trace minerals for white-tailed deer. Bucks need it for antler growth, immune function, and testosterone production during the pre-rut window. Does need it for fetal development and lactation. The entire herd is zinc deficient in most whitetail habitat because the soils across much of the eastern United States are naturally low in bioavailable zinc, especially in acidic forest soils under oak and hickory canopy. When a deer licks the moisture off a surface where a galvanic reaction is happening, the zinc ions dissolve directly onto its tongue. The deer tastes mineral. Its brain registers the taste as a nutrient source worth revisiting. It comes back, and it brings company. The copper component matters too because copper is another trace mineral whitetails seek, though in smaller quantities. The galvanic pair of zinc and copper releases both ions simultaneously, creating a mineral signature that is richer and more complex than a plain salt block, which is just sodium chloride and nothing else. The commercial mineral blocks you pay $18 to $22 for at the hunting store contain calcium, phosphorus, sodium, and trace amounts of zinc and copper mixed into a calcium carbonate base and pressed into a 25-pound block. The zinc and copper content in those blocks is measured in parts per million. The galvanic reaction from a few pennies pressed into a wet stump delivers the same two trace minerals in ionic form, which is more bioavailable than the powdered mineral oxide form used in commercial blocks. More bioavailable means the deer absorbs more of the mineral per lick, which means the deer comes back faster and more consistently, because the reward signal is stronger. Think of it like the difference between chewing a vitamin tablet and dissolving it under your tongue. Same nutrient, different delivery, different absorption rate. I tested this side by side on my Eastern Kentucky ridge during the summer of 2023. I had been running commercial mineral blocks on that property for 6 years and getting decent results, so this was not a situation where I had nothing to compare against. I had years of baseline camera data on what a $20 mineral block does in that specific timber, on that specific soil type. I set up 2 stumps 200 yards apart, roughly the length of 2 football fields, on the same elevation and the same timber type, same wind exposure, same soil. Stump A got a commercial mineral block from a hunting store, the $20 kind with the deer on the label. Stump B got 15 pennies, all post 1982, pressed copper side up into shallow slots. I cut into the top of the stump with a utility knife. I hung a cut-a-back trail camera on each stump at the same height and angle, and pulled cards every 2 weeks for 12 weeks through June, July, and August. The commercial block got steady traffic, roughly 8 to 12 different deer per 2-week pull, a mix of does, fawns, and young bucks. Good numbers. Normal mineral site behavior. Exactly what you would expect from a $20 mineral block doing its job on a property with moderate deer density. The penny stump got similar traffic for the first 2 weeks, then something shifted. By week 4, the penny stump was pulling 14 to 18 different deer per pull, and more importantly, mature bucks started showing up that had never appeared on the commercial block camera 200 yards away. By week 8, I had photos of 3 bucks I had never seen on the property before, all 3.5 years or older based on body size, hitting the penny stump between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. One of them was a heavy rack 10-point with a split G2 that I had 0 record of across 6 years of running cameras on that ridge. He showed up 5 times in 6 weeks on the penny stump and never once on the commercial block. The commercial block never pulled those deer. Not once across 12 weeks. Same property, same elevation, same timber type, 200 yards apart. The only variable was the mineral delivery method. Everything in this video, plus 60 more field-tested techniques, is in the Buck Hunter's Bible. 90 pages of deer behavior science, scent control, scouting methods, stand placement, and rut phase tactics with a quick reference card you can take to the stand. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. I do not know why the penny stump outperformed the block. My best guess is that the ionic form of the minerals tastes different to the deer, maybe sharper or more intense, and that the galvanic reaction refreshes itself every time it rains because new moisture restarts the ion release cycle. A commercial block dissolves at a constant rate whether it rained or not. The penny stump pulses with every weather event. Dry spell, nothing happens. Rain hits, the galvanic reaction fires up, and a fresh wave of zinc and copper ions coats the surface. That pulsing, that on and off mineral signal might be what keeps mature bucks coming back to investigate instead of hitting it once and moving on. It mirrors how natural mineral seeps work in the wild, where mineral availability fluctuates with groundwater levels and rainfall. The deer are wired to check those sources repeatedly because the availability changes. The penny stump accidentally replicates that pattern. The setup is simple, but the details matter. You want a dead stump or a downed log, not a living tree. Living trees push sap through the cambium layer, and the sap interferes with the galvanic reaction by coating the metal surface. Dead wood is porous, absorbs rain, and holds moisture against the metal for hours after a weather event, which is exactly what you want. Cut 15 to 20 shallow slots into the flat top of the stump using a utility knife or a chisel. Each slot should be just deep enough to hold a penny with the copper face up, about 1/8 of an inch deep, roughly the thickness of 2 stacked credit cards. Press the pennies and copper side up so the rain hits copper first and runs down into the zinc core underneath. The moisture trapped between the copper and zinc is where the galvanic reaction happens, and having the copper face skyward maximizes the surface area that catches rain. Space the pennies about 2 inches apart, roughly the width of your thumb, so each one has its own moisture collection zone. Do not stack them. Do not glue them. The whole point is that rain and dew reach the metal boundary naturally. If you seal the pennies with glue or epoxy, you kill the reaction. I made that mistake on my first attempt. Sealed 10 pennies into a stump with wood glue because I was worried about them falling out. 0 deer response for 3 weeks. I could not figure out what I had done wrong. Pulled them out, cleaned the glue off with a razor blade, pressed them back in without any adhesive, and had deer on the camera within 6 days. The reaction needs air and moisture to work, and glue seals out both. Lesson learned: do not try to improve on simplicity. The wood itself is the glue. As the stump swells with moisture, it grips the pennies and holds them in place. The location of the stump matters. Place it 15 to 25 yards from your stand, roughly the distance from the pitcher's mound to home plate on a baseball diamond. Upwind or crosswind from your expected deer approach, never directly downwind. You want the deer to approach the stump from a direction that puts them broadside or quartering away by the time they reach licking distance. If the stump is downwind of your stand, every deer that comes to lick it will have to walk through your scent cone to get there, and you will educate every mature buck on the property in 2 sites. Place the stump near existing deer sign, if possible. A trail crossing, a rub line, the edge of a bedding area. Deer that are already moving through the zone will find the stump faster than deer that have to travel across unfamiliar terrain to reach it. The stump activates within 1 to 3 rain events. In dry weather, you can jumpstart it by pouring a cup of water over the pennies before you leave. The water initiates the galvanic reaction and the zinc ions begin releasing immediately. I have done this in hill country, Texas in late August during a dry spell, and had deer on the camera within 48 hours of the water pour. Without the water, the same stump sat untouched for 11 days until the first rain. That taught me something I should have figured out earlier. The pennies do not attract deer by smell, they attract deer by taste. Until moisture activates the reaction and ions appear on the surface, there is nothing for the deer to detect from 50 yards away. The first deer finds it by accident, by browsing near the stump and licking the wet surface out of curiosity. Once that first deer discovers the mineral taste, it comes back, and other deer follow. The discovery is random, the return visits are not. The limitation you need to know is that this does not work well in areas with naturally high soil mineral content. Parts of the upper Midwest and the northern Great Plains have soils rich in zinc and copper from glacial deposits, and deer in those regions are not mineral deficient. They have less biological drive to seek out supplemental mineral sources because their diet already provides what they need. I discovered this the hard way on a property in southeast Minnesota, where the penny stump pulled almost 0 interest across an entire summer. The soil on that property tested high in zinc and copper when I sent a sample to the county extension office. The deer did not need what the pennies were offering. They walked past it the same way you would walk past a water fountain when you are not thirsty. The drive was not there because the deficiency was not there. In eastern Kentucky, southern Illinois, Shawnee country, Louisiana hardwoods, and most of Appalachia, the acidic forest soils are mineral poor, and the response is dramatically different. If you hunt ground with acidic soil under hardwood canopy, this technique is going to work hard. If you hunt rich agricultural ground in the Corn Belt, the response will be weaker or non-existent because the deer are already getting those minerals from the crops and the soil. That does not mean the technique failed. It means your deer are not deficient and they do not need what you are offering. Test your soil or check your county extension data before you invest time in this. 5 minutes of research saves you an entire season of wondering why nothing is showing up. Your county extension office will test a soil sample for free or close to it in most states, and the results will tell you exactly whether your ground is mineral poor enough for this technique to pull hard. One more thing on the metals. The penny is the easiest and cheapest option, but it is not the only one. Any 2 dissimilar metals in contact will produce a galvanic reaction. Old-timers in Louisiana, hardwood country, have been nailing copper roofing tacks into aluminum fence posts and watching deer lick the posts for generations. The aluminum and copper pair produces a stronger galvanic potential than the zinc and copper pair in a penny, which means a faster ion release and a more intense mineral taste. If you have access to scrap copper wire and aluminum flashing from a hardware store, you can wrap a short length of copper wire around an aluminum nail and drive it into the stump. That combination creates a stronger reaction than pennies alone. The total cost is maybe 30 cents per stump. My wife found me wrapping copper wire around aluminum nails at the kitchen table one October evening and asked if I had finally lost it. I told her it was electrochemistry. She said it looked like arts and crafts for adults. She was not entirely wrong. I have run both setups, pennies and copper on aluminum, and in my limited testing across 2 properties, the copper on aluminum pulled roughly 20% more deer visits over a 12-week period. Not a huge sample size, not a controlled study, but consistent enough that I now run both on every property. Look, everything I am walking through here is in the Buck Hunter's Bible. 90 pages, scent control, scouting, stand placement, rut tactics, plus a quick reference card for the stand. Link in the description, QR code on screen. The placement method I promised at the beginning is what turned this from a decent trick into something I set up on every property I hunt. Instead of pressing pennies into the flat top of a stump, drill 15 to 20 holes into the side of a standing dead tree at deer nose height, roughly 30 to 36 inches off the ground, about waist height on an average adult. Use a drill bit just slightly larger than a penny, roughly 3/4 of an inch, and drill each hole about a 1/2 inch deep. Press a penny into each hole copper side out. The holes hold the pennies more securely than surface slots. The tree bark channels rainwater directly into each hole and pools it against the metal, and the vertical surface puts the licking zone at exactly the height where a deer naturally holds its head while browsing. On a flat stump, deer have to drop their head to lick, which puts them in a posture where they are looking at the ground and less likely to present a clean broadside shot. On a vertical surface at nose height, deer lick standing upright with their head level, which is the exact posture you want for a clean shot through both lungs. The vertical drill method also triples the active moisture contact time because rainwater runs down the bark and pools in the drill holes instead of sheeting off a flat surface. More moisture contact means more galvanic activity, which means more mineral ions on the surface, which means stronger and more frequent deer visits. I tested this against the flat stump method on a southern Illinois Shawnee Ridge property, and the vertical drill setup pulled roughly 3 times the camera activity over the same 12-week summer window. Same number of pennies, same property, same timber type, different geometry. That is the entire secret. Same chemistry, same cost, same effort, but the vertical orientation changes how water interacts with the metal and how the deer interacts with the surface. Geometry beats volume every time on a galvanic lick. Same principle I covered in the stand placement video. How you position something in 3-dimensional space changes the result more than what the thing is made of. The whole system costs less than $0.25. I have spent more money on gas station coffee on the way to a single hunt than I have spent on every galvanic mineral site I have ever built combined. One trip to the junk drawer in your kitchen gives you enough pennies to set up 4 or 5 mineral sites across your entire property. Your kid's piggy bank is a mineral lick supply depot, and nobody in your family knows it yet. The commercial mineral industry charges you $18 to $22 per block, and most hunters run 2 to 4 blocks per property per season, which comes to $80 to $90 a year. Over 20 years, that is somewhere around $1,600 to $1,800 on pressed mineral that dissolves into the dirt and has to be replaced every few months. 20 pennies in a dead tree costs you 20 cents, refreshes itself every time it rains, and lasts until the tree falls over. Think about that number for a second. The same 2 trace minerals the deer are actually seeking, delivered in a more bioavailable form, for less than the cost of a single gumball from a machine at the grocery store. The guys who know about this do not talk about it at deer camp. Not because it is some sacred secret, but because it sounds completely insane until you run a camera over it. A penny in a tree stump. It sounds like something a kid would do. But the galvanic chemistry is real, the mineral delivery is real, and the deer response on mineral-poor soils is real. You have watched this far, so now you know. Set up 4 stumps or standing dead trees this summer. Use pennies on 2 of them and the copper wire on aluminum setup on the other 2, so you can compare both methods on your specific ground. Run cameras on all 4. Pull cards in August and count the bucks. Compare the numbers to whatever you were running last year, and let the data tell you whether this is real on your specific ground, with your specific soil chemistry. And when someone at deer camp asks you why your mineral site cost 80 cents and is out pulling their $22 commercial block, that is your call, whether you explain the electrochemistry or just smile and change the subject. The old-timers in Louisiana and Kentucky and southern Illinois knew this for decades before anybody put a camera on it. They did not call it galvanic reaction. They called it a battery lick. And they kept it to themselves because every hunter who hears it for the first time says the same thing. There is no way that works. Every single one of them said it. Run a camera, it works. It has always worked.